Hey everybody, welcome to The Early Edge, a mentorship podcast for next generation leaders where we share insights we wish we had learned earlier in our careers.
We want to equip you to learn more, grow faster, and thrive in both your work and personal life. I'm Jay.
And I'm Jeff. Let's get into today's episode.
Welcome back to the Early Edge Mentorship Podcast. Today we're continuing our series on communication. Very excited to have a talented professional join us to share her wisdom, insight, and her tactics that she teaches to organizations on conflict and doing it well and effectively. Stephanie Polen joins us. She is the founder and CEO of the Polen Group. She's with us because I have seen her work and work magic with challenging teams, dysfunctional teams, troubled organizations, and or taking organizations from good to great. So I've had the pleasure of serving clients alongside her and just knew that she was the one we needed to have on to talk about this. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Jeff.
So good to have you. So I don't butcher your intro. Can you give us your bio? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Who do you do it for? All that stuff.
Sure. You actually set me up pretty well there, Jay. I am one of those strange people that actually excels in opportunities of conflict. I actually think that they are interesting and they make me quite curious to see what's going on. And that is actually a lot of what I do in my practice. I work primarily with organizations that are going through a significant transition, whether that's pre or post a merger and acquisition, or a founder transitioning out, or someone new in the C-suite coming in. So very complicated, high emotion, potentially conflict-driven scenarios. It's where I spend all day, every day.
This is exciting because I think this topic in our communication series will resonate so much with people. It may be one that we kind of want to sweep under the rug, but we think you're going to give us some tools to really help in this topic. First question for you then is just, why does this matter? Why does dealing with conflict matter?
Conflict has kind of a bad rap, right? It is one of the things that when it comes to our relationship, when you hear the word conflict, it's almost like it should have that music behind it that says dun dun dun, right? It gives us this like sick feeling in the pit of our stomach. But conflict is important in order for us to build trust in our relationships and the foundation of really strong teams. So when we do brush it under the rug and ignore it, it festers and it becomes something that becomes a problem, not something that is a constructive way for us to grow as individuals and as a team. So learning how to deal with it head on is very important.
To give our listeners a bit of a mindset or a picture in their mind of conflict, because conflict can be extreme, it can be subtle. Sometimes we only think of the extreme conflict. Is there a story or an example you can share to help people see this?
Conflict ranges from the day-to-day, the guy next to you who brings in fish for lunch, and you need to have a hard conversation with him about heating up the fish in the microwave, all the way to actually broken trust between team members. And regardless of the severity of that conflict, it really is about solving a problem. And that problem is compounded because there's emotions attached with it. So working through and trying to understand the discernment of where did that emotion come from is key to helping us understand the problem that we're trying to solve and the right tactic and approach to take.
Well, how do you, when you're working with teams, how do you assess where it's coming from? Do you have frameworks or tools that help you get a better sense for why it's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about conflict, I like to think about it in a traditional kind of 2x2, which is a good old business school framework. Is the conflict constructive or destructive? And is it active or passive? And before I walk you through what I would consider in each of those buckets, I think it's important to say that we all have behaviors that are destructive as well as constructive. And we also have some passive behaviors as well as active. And so just knowing that and being able to understand that and having some grace for ourselves going in is an important part of self-awareness as a leader, especially early on in our career, that will help us lean into resolving conflict in a more comfortable and natural way. Let me break it down for you.
Yeah.
So the first group is constructive and active conflict responses. Those include things like taking someone else's perspective, creating a solution for the problem, expressing your emotions, and reaching out for support. Now, often somebody will say, Steph, like, why would expressing emotions be an constructive thing in a conflict scenario, right? Normally you're picturing there's some stress and some anger and some tension in there. So why would expressing that be constructive? Well, when somebody says, I'm really frustrated with the way this happened, then you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yep.
You're not guessing, right? You're not wondering what they're thinking about. When they express that emotion, then it's on the table and then you can actually solve the problem.
Yep.
So that's active and constructive. Constructive and passive, though, include things like taking a pause and giving yourself a chance to delay before you respond and being reflective in the way that you're thinking. So just taking a beat. So if you know that you're someone that in the middle of a conflict scenario can really kind of come in hot on it, a constructive way to deal with conflict is to say, I need a minute.
And Stephanie, on these two, on the scale of passive or active, is sometimes the decision or the determinant of which one, how you treat it, how maybe extreme or challenging the conflict is. In other words, I have a conflict with my boss, and it's not just a slight difference of opinion, but we have a major disconnect. Is that sometimes where the passive is a little bit better for me to step back and pause and think and reflect before I just respond?
It's certainly one way to think about that. The thing that I always think about when it comes to conflict, though, is does that passive behavior actually serve you? So in that example, sometimes when I delay responding, I'm actually not just delaying responding, I'm moving over into a I'm moving over into a destructive response, which is actually me just hiding.
Well, that's good. So is it fair to say that for our listeners, if taking a pause is your first healthy response so you can remain constructive, you at some point need to move to active, though? Is that true?
100%.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. But there can be a tendency, especially if really dealing with conflict directly is a new muscle that you're developing, there can be a tendency to say, I'm going to consciously choose to delay responding and then just let enough time go by or overthink it so much. And then we never actually talk about it.
If it happens again, okay, then I'll deal with it. Then it happens again. If it happens again, I'll deal with it.
Or
totally ready for the next time.
Well, yeah, I don't want to jump on your destructive because therapy couch time. I've got a lot of memories of being destructive, so I'm sure you'll give us some of those examples.
Well, so let's just talk about that. Destructive active behaviors are what most of us think about when we think about conflict and the big scary word of conflict. And that includes things like demeaning others, retaliating, displaying anger, winning at all costs, right? The really visible tactics of trying to win a conflict. Those are obviously very destructive. Most of the time, though, in a business environment, that's not actually what's happening. Hopefully, we're not in a lot of environments anymore where people are demeaning others and pounding fists on the table to get their way, that those behaviors are not as visible, but that is what people have in their mind.
For sure. That's the stereotypical toxic and work environment where the boss is just ripping people during meetings.
Yeah. So why would I have a hard conversation with my boss if I think he's going to be angry?
Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree with your assessment too that it's not as common, really. It's not the norm, but there's plenty of destructive conflict. So if it's not the overt, out loud stuff we think of when we watch a courtroom drama, what is it?
It's avoiding.
Yeah,
it's avoiding it, hiding our emotion. Remember we said expressing our emotion is active and constructive. Hiding our emotion is destructive and passive. It's the opposite side of the spectrum. And it's because when someone can't understand what our position is, then they can't solve it. And if we can't articulate what it is, then we can't solve it either. So when we hide from those emotions that come into that conflict, everybody's stuck.
Stephanie, I'll share one quick story, and you can tell me whether this was active or passive.
Okay.
And I kind of chuckle because I think of an extreme situation where I once had a boss that, I use this word very carefully, but was a bully. It was both in how he treated me, how he treated others, words he used, and just the hammer approach. And I didn't find it constructive. And my tendency, my reaction was, to heck with this, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm sure that's a feeling that a lot of our listeners have from time to time with certain people. How do you categorize that? I'm sure there's a way that I could be counseled or coached to say, can we solve this? But maybe sometimes you can't. I don't know. Is if I think, well, this can't be resolved and I'm going to go look elsewhere, I guess that can be an active approach?
That's absolutely an active approach. That is absolutely an active approach. Because the thing that I would wonder in that scenario is, was it a one-time thing? So was your boss having a bad day in that interaction? Was there something else that maybe could have contributed to that conversation going downhill? Was this a pattern? Did that behavior affect anyone else, or was it just with you? So starting to kind of look at, instead of one interaction causing me to start to look for another opportunity, evaluating how big is the problem.
Yeah.
And really putting that in context, I think is important before we fly the coop on something like that.
There's something I've always asked in situations of difference or conflict. I've always asked myself, is this a problem that needs to be resolved, or is it conflict to manage? Sometimes I use that with my teams or people that I'm working with.
I love that.
And it's a bit of is this person so bad that I need to work them out of the organization? Or is this just conflict? And conflict, to your point, can be active and constructive if it's handled correctly and dealt with.
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's not even conflict. I think there's actually a difference between conflict and tension. So tension is built into the business. There is supposed to be tension in the way that teams and organizations work together. For example, as a leader, I am not allowed to give my favorite team member a 50% raise just because I like them. HR has a responsibility to hold me accountable and have some guardrails about how we treat our employees so that I, as a leader, don't go off and do something random. That's tension that's built into the system. It's not HR trying to control me. It's not me in conflict with HR about this person. It's just tension. That's our roles. Sometimes that tension can escalate, and that usually when it becomes personal, then it moves into conflict. But that tension and recognizing that there's a component that is built into the way that we work, I think is also helpful as a foundation.
Wow, I love that realization. And there are some typical functional tensions that exist. Sales and operations would be a prototypical one.
Of course.
We have sort of one overarching shared goal, which is organizational success, but we might have some functional responsibilities that can be in tension with one another. Manufacturing and safety is another one. So we both need to execute on our functional responsibilities and learn how to let the tension serve our organization. And knowing that is, boy, that's a really good point. Knowing that going in, that tension is a healthy thing when done well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Can
we dig a little bit more into the passive and destructive and sort of avoidance? And would you put gossip in that? Does it become active when I go tell somebody else?
I would definitely put gossip in the destructive and inactive category.
Yeah.
Actually,
you're just not active with
passive.
the other, you're just not active with the actual subject of your issue. Okay. So
that's right.
So I assume you help people assess why they would behave in a destructive way. And let's leave the active part out and just say the passive. Why would a well-intentioned person be destructive but passive?
I find most of the time it's because they simply don't have the tools to be prepared to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So especially if I'm new in my career, maybe I haven't had to have a hard conversation with my leader before, or maybe I'm new to leading a team and I haven't had to give someone feedback on their performance or resolve conflict between two people on my team. If I haven't done that before, it's intimidating. It's very intimidating. And so it's easy to slide into those passive behaviors of hiding and avoiding in that scenario.
Yeah, and I imagine fear is the underlying emotion.
Sure.
I don't know how this is going to go. This is going to be tough. They're going to be hard on me. This won't go well. Or maybe I brought baggage from a past job or a home life that was, conflict was a really painful thing. And so I just...
or didn't happen at all. Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
So they didn't, it was never modeled. And they really never learned to handle it.
Great point. So you talked about them, not having the tools. So do you have an approach you recommend? How do you take organizations and teams through this process to get everybody more on the same page?
I do. The way that I like to think about conflict is approaching it with care. And CARE is an acronym, and it stands for clarify, align, reflect, and engage. When we're working as a leader, I think it's always important for us to start with ourselves. So the CARE acronym is designed to help me as a leader process how I want to engage. So let me talk you through it.
Yeah.
Clarify is where you want to spend probably 60% of your thinking time before you go in. And in that clarifying stage, it's important to define the issue very specifically. So why is it that there is a conversation that needs to happen? What was happening in that moment? What were my emotions? What were the things that led up to this? And really be very clear about, okay, before I put our relationship at risk, do I completely understand everything that led to this moment and my role in it?
That's fantastic. Okay, and so you're preparing before just starting. You don't have the framework in your brain and then you just follow it in the heat of the moment. You're preparing.
You're preparing. Now, the more that you practice this, the easier it gets, right? You're able to do it more in the moment. But I do think being thoughtful about it is important, because here's what I find when I put my coaching hat on, working one-on-one with leaders. A lot of these conflict conversations actually never happen because the leader realizes that maybe they were part of the problem.
Oh, wow. So in the preparation, there's self-reflection. I'm trying to understand. This is to really the point Jeff made as well, which is this something we need to do conflict about? Is it worthy of it? And then you're saying, what's my role? What am I bringing to it? Role? Biases, could it be me? Oh, that's really good. Okay. So what if you go through clarification? Yeah. You know what? This does need to happen. Then what's next?
Then the next piece of it. And again, this is you with yourself preparing. Align is about asking questions and assuming positive intent as you're asking those questions. So it's not like, what were they thinking? It is, what was actually happening with that person that day? Maybe that interaction that caused this conflict was out of character for that individual. Maybe there was something going on that had nothing to do with that project or nothing to do with that interaction that affected the way that individual showed up. So it's aligning to ensure understanding and evaluating, okay, what else could have been happening with this person, and really trying to see things from their perspective before you actually approach them.
Got it. Okay.
One of the key things I heard there was just best intentions. Don't assume. It's so easy just to assume so many things, and a lot of times they're negative. So best intentions.
Yeah.
Very good.
I like that.
Yeah. Then the third step is honestly probably the hardest, because we don't like to take time to pause and reflect. There's a conflict we've decided we're talking about, like, let's just get it done. But the reflect stage of this gives us an opportunity to think about, how do I want to show up in this conversation?
Yeah.
What are the words that I want to say? What are the feelings that I want them to have on the other side of it? So sometimes we want to have a conversation that has a gentle, agreeable, open-minded pace. And sometimes we might need to have a very direct, very forthright kind of conversation. But you have to plan that.
Yeah, I love the
you have to
intentionality.
decide that.
Yeah, intentionality is one of our favorite words. This is filled with intentionality and thoughtfulness. Yeah, that's great.
Stephanie, is there a quick nugget you can give on how much time should you plan on planning and reflecting? Is it based on the severity? Is it based on the size of the team? What just is a quick? Okay.
Yep, it's just based on severity. You could go through this entire thought process in 3 minutes.
Got it.
If it's a big deal across the team, very complex problem, maybe you want to spend a little bit more time and iterate back and forth. But it really depends on kind of the scope of the conflict.
Well, and I imagine the reflect, and you mentioned this could be the hardest part. If I've got some emotion going on, I've got some frustration going on or some hurt going on, I might have to take some meaningful time on reflect so I can get in the right headspace to actually have that go the way I want it to go constructively.
Yeah. The key component of reflect is also what leads into engage. So engage is about being specific about the outcomes and expectations and having that conversation. So often what I see when it comes to conflict is, someone is upset about a scenario, they bring the person into the room and they just blah all over the place, right? Like they just word vomit all the things that are a problem and expect the person to have a reaction. But if we weren't clear about what we want that person to do, when they leave the room, they're going to go do the same thing they've done before.
Yeah.
Right? So a good example is, if you have an employee and you have had a performance conversation with them multiple times, and now you really need to use this methodology because you're not just in a feedback conversation, there's actual conflict because it's affecting other teams. And you've looked at this and you said, okay, I know I'm irritated, but we also have a pattern. So I'm going to clarify that there's a pattern of behavior with this employee. Now, if I think about what's going on with this employee, this is new for him. I haven't seen him show up in this way. He's usually on top of things. So I'm trying to align my expectations with how he normally shows up. So before I go in and have that conversation, because I'm noticing that this behavior is new, I want to reflect on the tone that I want to bring into that. I don't want to turn him away or cause him to stop being a good employee and get rid of his ability to re-engage. I want him to be with me. So I want to be thoughtful about that. But when I engage with him, I need to be very clear and say, when you did this, this was the result of that. Next time, I need you to do that instead.
Yeah, that's great. And I can see, in addition to being an effective acronym, I can see why CARE is the word chosen, because it really is others focused. We want the best for this person, or I wouldn't put this time in preparing. I wouldn't check myself. I wouldn't make sure I'm being thoughtful about what else could be going on with them. So it really is a caring approach to conflict, and having the mindset that I want the best for folks ought to make it easier to have these conversations, I would imagine, especially when I feel equipped in the process.
Absolutely. I always think when it comes to conflict that relationship is the most important thing. It is. I think when it comes to conflict, our normal mindset is I just have to win it, to be done with it, or I have to win it. And actually, it's a time where a relationship is either built or broken.
Oh, that's great.
Story that comes to mind, I'm working with a client right now, and they're trying to improve and they're trying to grow the business. And the core need is around growth. But what I'm uncovering is that they don't ever take time to spend together as a team or a leadership group. Mm-hmm. And so there's no forums or mechanisms for the care and the collaboration. And so maybe some of this is asking the question, am I taking the time for myself, or does our team or the business afford the right mechanisms and the right collaboration meetings, things like that, to make sure this happens?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have the rhythms of relationship already in place, wow, it's going to be really hard to have that conflict conversation, because then it's going to feel like a big deal. That dun dun dun, kind of conversation with that music, right? Like it's going to feel like that in that scenario because you don't have relationship rhythms already in place. So it's that feeling of, someone puts a meeting on your calendar at 4:30, you're like, oh gosh. Mm-hmm. So if we don't have normal one-on-ones and weekly check-ins and that kind of framework in place where we can have these conversations, they actually sometimes become bigger than what they really are.
The anxiety of that 4:30 meeting on a Friday from your boss when you never meet with your boss and there's no real description in the meeting invite what the topic is. Before we wrap up with key takeaways, if somebody wants to go deeper, is there a resource or a book or two that you would point them to so they can go deeper? And I can throw one out and give you another second to think. One that comes to mind for me, one of the authors around team dynamics that's fairly well known is Patrick Lenciani. He wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And if you don't think managing conflict or strengthening this muscle matters, fear of conflict is one of his 5 dysfunctions of a team. And it gives some deeper and just more tools that you can leverage. It's a good short book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I would recommend, and not a book or a podcast necessarily, but is just the ongoing work of self-reflection around this and noticing what your own personal patterns and behaviors are. I mean, there are umpteen million assessments out there that we could take that would help us define this, but really thinking about, when was the last time that you personally were triggered in a situation, and what kind of posture did you take? Was it constructive? Was it active? And really understanding that for yourself, I think, is the lens through which you can look at the approach to conflict in your organization. So especially early on in your career, really digging in and knowing yourself is a solid foundation.
Yeah, we're going to popcorn our key takeaways, so we'll share just whatever, and that was going to be my first one, which is great, which is know your default conflict style today. And when it comes up, where do you go in the quadrant? Are you active, passive, constructive, destructive? Where do you fall? And then you can understand where your opportunities for growth are to try to become someone who is constructive in all things and knows when to be passive and then can become active at the right time. So that's a great one. Another one I have is overarching conflict is just crucial. It's essential. It's a core component of high-functioning teams and high-performing, high-influence professionals is the ability to do conflict really well is just essential.
And maybe one that I'll add to that, and it's one that we can leverage the CARE methodology that you shared, Stephanie, is just become more comfortable stepping into and handling, because the more you step into, the more you handle, the more comfortable you are, and the better you get at resolving or dealing and managing conflict.
Yeah, great. Stephanie, do you have any key takeaways you would make sure our listeners know beyond what we shared?
Don't be scared of conflict.
Yeah.
Don't be scared of it. Conflict is an opportunity, like I said, to break or build a relationship. And it is the thing that makes leaders and teams successful when they can do it well.
Well, that is our early edge for the week. Stephanie, it's so good to have you, and great, always a joy to connect with you. Thanks for joining us for the Early Edge Mentorship Podcast.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Early Edge, a mentorship podcast for next generation leaders. If you have feedback or would like to submit questions or a topic idea, email us at earlyedge@reddogadvisors.com
or earlyedge@altaimpact.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review. See you next time.